Well, good afternoon. I'm Ryan Yamamoto. Our other top story tomorrow is, of course, Super Tuesday, the busiest day of the primary campaign and a crucial moment for both President Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who are the overwhelming frontrunners for the Democratic and Republican presidential nominations. More than a third of delegates are now up for grabs tomorrow, with 15 states, including California and one U.S. territory holding their primary elections. And voting in California is already underway. People have been dropping off their ballots. Mail ballots must be postmarked by Tuesday to count. And the highest profile state race in California is the one to succeed the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. The crowded field of candidates include Democratic Representatives Adam Schiff, Katie Porter, Barbara Lee, and former baseball star and Republican Steve Garvey. A new UC Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies poll shows Garvey is favored by 27% of likely voters. Schiff is at 25%, Porter 19%, and Lee received 8%. And the most consequential proposition on the state ballot is probably Proposition 1. Governor Gavin Newsom is in San Francisco today to get last-minute votes for that measure. This weekend, the governor was in Los Angeles County pushing the $6.3 billion bond measure. Prop 1 is a key part of the governor's plan to create drug and mental health treatment beds. It would massively overhaul how the state spends billions in the battle to end the homeless crisis, but critics claim it diverts billions away from already effective mental health services.
They're talking about housing and getting people housing, but the bulk of what's going in is going to be to build facilities to warehouse them, hospital beds. Hospital beds are not homes.
If Proposition 1 passes, it would make major changes. The California's Mental Health Services Act passed in 2004, which expanded and modified county mental health systems. In the race for president, a major ruling today by the nation's highest court, the Supreme Court ruled former President Donald Trump can stay on the Colorado ballot, and that states cannot use the 14th Amendment to disqualify him for running again for president.
I want to start by thanking the Supreme Court for its unanimous decision today. It was a very important decision.
Voters in Colorado and other states have sought to do that because of his conduct surrounding the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Skylar Henry reports from the Supreme Court.
The nation's highest court handed former President Donald Trump a unanimous victory, ruling that Colorado cannot keep him off the ballot for the 2024 presidential election.
The rationale here really is we don't want states to be able to do this.
At issue was a narrow Colorado Supreme Court decision in a case brought by voters, arguing Trump should be removed from the state's ballots because he committed insurrection on January 6th and was disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which states, "No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office who took an oath and then engaged in insurrection."
Those who violated their oath to the Constitution once before will do it again, and even worse if they're allowed back into power.
But during oral arguments in early February, the justices seemed skeptical whether states can use the obscure constitutional provision to kick Trump off the ballot, rather than leaving it up to Congress.
The court didn't weigh in on whether January 6th was an insurrection or whether former President Trump engaged in it. The justices instead focused on the structural issue, whether courts can go out on their own and enforce this Civil War-era provision, and the unanimous answer was no, they cannot.
Without Congress helping us figure out who engaged in an insurrection, whether or not there's a problem, whether or not somebody has been found liable, guilty, whatever it is, it's not up to one state to do it. Congress needs to set the rules here.
The current GOP presidential frontrunner cheered the Supreme Court's decision.
You cannot take somebody out of a race. The voters can take the person out of the race very quickly, but a court shouldn't be doing that, and the Supreme Court saw that.
Trump still faces criminal cases surrounding the events of January 6th.
And former President Trump is claiming the criminal cases against him should be tossed because he has presidential immunity. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear arguments whether he does or does not have that immunity. CBS News Bay Area will have all the results from tomorrow's primary. We have complete coverage on air and streaming on kpix.com and the CBS News app.
Well, thank you very much. I want to start by thanking the Supreme Court for its unanimous decision today. It was a very important decision. We're very well crafted, and I think it will go a long way toward bringing our country together, which our country needs. And they worked long, they worked hard, and frankly, they worked very quickly on something that will be spoken about 100 years from now and 200 years from now. Extremely important. Essentially, you cannot take somebody out of a race because an opponent would like to have it that way. And it has nothing to do with the fact that it's the leading candidate, whether it was the leading candidate or a candidate that was well down on the totem pole. You cannot take somebody out of a race. The voters can take the person out of the race very quickly, but a court shouldn't be doing that, and the Supreme Court saw that very well. And I really do believe that will be a unifying factor, because while most states were thrilled to have me, there were some that didn't, and they didn't want that for political reasons. They didn't want that because of poll numbers, because the poll numbers are very good. We're beating President Biden in almost every poll. New York Times came out yesterday with a very big poll for us. So they didn't like that, and you can't do that. You can't do what they tried to do. And hopefully Colorado, as an example, will unify. I know there's tremendous support. They've brought our support up very strong in Colorado, because people in Colorado thought that was a terrible thing that they did. And while we're on the subject, and another thing that will be coming up very soon will be immunity for a president, and not immunity for me, but for any president. If a president doesn't have full immunity, you really don't have a president, because nobody that is serving in that office will have the courage to make, in many cases, what would be the right decision, or it could be the wrong decision. It could be, in some cases, the wrong decision, but they have to make decisions, and they have to make them free of all terror that can be rained upon them when they leave office, or even before they leave office. And some decisions are very tough. I can tell you that as a president, that some decisions to make are very tough. I took out ISIS, and I took out some very big people from the standpoint of a different part of the world. Two of the leading terrorists, probably the two leading terrorists ever that we've ever seen in this world. And those are big decisions. I don't want to be prosecuted for it. Another president wouldn't want to be prosecuted for it. It had a tremendously positive impact. It stopped everything cold. And sometimes you have to make, they were tough decisions. Sometimes you have to make decisions like that. When you make a decision, you don't want to have your opposing party or opponent, or even somebody that just thinks you're wrong, bring a criminal suit against you, or any kind of a suit when you leave office. I have that right now at a level that nobody's ever seen before. I have rogue prosecutors, and I have rogue judges. I have judges that are out of control. And it's a very unfair thing for me, but serving perhaps as a sample to others of what should not be happening when you make good decisions. And in my case, the economy was great. We didn't go into any wars. We totally defeated ISIS. We provided the largest tax cuts in history. We provided the largest regulation cuts in history. But think of it, no wars. We beat ISIS 100% of the caliphate.